Welcome to the Group 6 Paris Climate Accord presentation. Let's meet the team.
Hi, I'm Sean. I am a third year here at Bothell, and I'm studying law, economics, and public policy.
Hi there, my name is Dominic Wolf. I'm a sophomore at UW Bothell, and my major is business administration.
Hello, my name is Frank. My major right now is environmental studies, and it's my first year here at UW Bothell.
My name is Maddie. I'm a third year at UW Bothell, and I'm majoring in media and communications.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm a third year here at UW Bothell, studying law, economic, and public policy.
Let's take a quick look at three terms that often come up in international agreements: accords, treaties, and protocols. Let's start with accords. An accord is, at its core, an agreement. The term is typically used in broader, often multilateral contexts where multiple parties come together to express a shared intention or understanding. Accords may or may not be legally binding, and they're often used to lay the groundwork for future cooperation. Moving on to treaties, those are more formal, legally binding agreements between states or international entities. What sets treaties apart is that they carry legal weight. If a party violates a treaty, there can be real consequences, including punitive measures or sanctions. Treaties often require ratification by the governments involved, making them a more rigid and enforceable form of agreement. Finally, let's talk about protocols. Protocols function as extensions or supplements to treaties. They provide the technical details, procedures, or specific obligations that help implement the broader goals in a laid out treaty. In other words, while a treaty sets the framework, a protocol fills in the fine print. So in summary, accords establish general agreement, treaties make that agreement legally binding, and protocols provide the operational detail to bring it to life. Now, to bring this all together, let's talk about a real-world example, the Paris Climate Accord, also known as the Paris Agreement. This is actually a treaty adopted in 2015 by nearly every country in the world. Its main goal, to limit climate warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and ideally to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to reduce the risk and impacts of climate change. It's a very powerful example of how global cooperation through treaties and accords can aim to address one of the biggest challenges of our time. That all being said, we can discuss some of the limitations. The agreement relies on voluntary pledges, and there's no legal penalties if you don't abide. Goals vary in ambition and may fall short of the target. And really, it's up to, the leader of a country to abide by public pressure, if they have shame or any sort of conscience. So far, the Paris Agreement has boosted global climate change awareness and clean energy investment. Over 190 countries have pledged action. However, emissions are still rising, and most countries are off track to meet their emissions goal.
Entering and exiting the agreement. A country must wait 3 years after the agreement takes effect for them before formally starting withdrawal. Any country can join by submitting a formal document called an Instrument of Ratification, Acceptance, or Approval to the UN. The agreement takes effect for a country 30 days after submission. After submitting a notice of withdrawal to the UN, it takes 1 full year to take effect.
United States and the Paris Climate Accord. The United States has had a turbulent and politically charged relationship with the Paris Climate Accord, marked by shifts in policy depending on the party in power. A brief timeline. Under President Obama, the U.S. joined the Paris Agreement in December 2015 as a founding signatory. Obama viewed the accord as a critical step in addressing global climate change. The United States pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2025. However, the agreement was entered into via executive action rather than as a ratified treaty, making it vulnerable to reversal by future administration. A brief timeline. In June 2017, President Donald Trump announced that the United States would withdraw from the accord. He argued that it would hurt the American economy and give unfair advantages to other countries like China and India. The formal withdrawal process began in November 2019 and took effect on November 4, 2020, just one day after the presidential election. President Joe Biden reversed course immediately after taking office. On January 20, 2021, his first day in office, he signed an executive order to rejoin the Paris Agreement. The U.S. officially re-entered the agreement. President Donald Trump has once again initiated the United States withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Trump signed Executive Order 14162 titled Putting America First in International Environmental Agreements, directing the immediate withdrawal from the accord. In a presidential debate in 2024, Trump stated, "The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion and China nothing, Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a rip-off. The United States and I ended it because I did not want to waste that money." The article by RAI.org states that the annual funding would be $1 trillion each from both domestic and abroad, so Trump's statement is not far off here. The $1 trillion would go to also help developing countries develop clean energy infrastructure.
U.S. opinions. Scientists, activists, and Democratic politicians have expressed deep concern for America's exit, deepening the climate crisis and creating irreversible damage. After Trump first left the Paris Climate Accord, President Biden re-entered when he took office, just for Trump to exit once more. President Trump expressed his reasoning for exiting the Paris Climate Accord to be for economic gain. This means that companies would be able to maximize production and profit at the expense of the environment. This basically allows companies to pollute freely in order to maximize profit. U.S. support. Although there are some exceptions, U.S. support for climate policies are fairly nonpartisan. 69% of Americans believe the U.S. should uphold Paris Climate Accord agreements, and 7 in 10 Americans believe that climate change is a problem that the country and government should work on.
Here are a few international opinions regarding U.S. President Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. Canada has stated that it's deplorable that the President of the U.S. has decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. They also stated that they see a lot of support from the U.S. states themselves and the private sector as well. Brazil has stated that Trump's decisions are the opposite of policies guided by evidence brought by science and common sense, imposed by the reality of extreme weather events, including in his own country. France has stated that it's not a future we want for ourselves, it's not a future we want for our children, and it's not a future we want for our world. The UK has emphasized that it's in the United States nation's self-interest to seek to tackle the climate crisis. In a combined statement from Germany, France, and Italy, they stated that the Paris Agreement cannot be renegotiated, and it's a vital instrument for our planet, societies, and economies.